Oh, fuck. Shit.
Hey friends, it's Will and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I make the biggest mistake of my career, quite possibly, and in the process almost quit leatherwork. And I am not joking, and this is not clickbait. So, I have been working on this pattern since I left Equus. It's a modification on one of theirs, and I absolutely love it. And I thought, what better way to announce it to all of you guys than to make an absolutely beautiful alligator and Auran goat skin version of it, to demonstrate how to make it for you guys. And up until right at the end, the worst possible time to make a mistake, it goes fantastically. So the first thing I'm doing is obviously cutting out the pattern pieces from my goat skin. This is a 0.8 millimeter, which is what I recommend for the internals of the wallet. All of the information is on the pattern available on my website, of course. And I do need to make a little modification to the pattern because I forgot I need to cut two of these out, not one of them. But anyway, it all goes absolutely beautifully up until this point. I'm not sure what you can get wrong about cutting a pattern, but I'm sure you can get something wrong about it. But here we are, cutting the pattern nice and easily. This goat skin is an absolute dream to work with. I've worked with Auran goat for probably about 3 years, and I love it. I've decided to use alligator tail for this particular external panel, just because I really like the looks of the bigger scales than what you get on the belly, and this is the one I had available, so that's what I decided to do. It's difficult to cut. If you've never worked with alligator tail or alligator crocodile, any of these exotics, it is really, really hard to cut, so do sharpen your knife beforehand. I always overcut panels, so when I'm cutting out anything, I overcut and then I cut down to size afterwards. Because if you're cutting out from your main piece, so your main skin or whatever it is, and you cut it to size, and then you slip and you cut underneath the pattern or whatever it might be, you're screwed. So I always overcut my panel. This one is 1.5 millimeters, which you can just about make out. It's a little bit thick. I would normally recommend 1 mil, but at home I have absolutely no way of splitting down alligator skin. It's very, very hard to split down. You fully laminate the back panel to the lining. You don't always fully laminate back panels, and I'll get into that in another video of when to laminate and when not to laminate. But in this case, I did go ahead and laminate it. The downside to this is obviously you see all of the scales on the inside, which some people like, some people don't, but it just gives it a little bit more rigidity, which is why I went for this. And I do have to admit, cutting out all of the panels does take a few years. It is by far the most tedious part of making any bifold wallet, is cutting out the panels. But this is not the part I got. This is not the part I got wrong, even a little bit. This actually went very, very smoothly. I cut them all out. As you can see, I overcut all of them. You don't need to overcut them by much, but just enough so that you have the opportunity to cut them perfectly to size. If when you're cutting this out yourself, you don't want to have a turned edge on the top, you can cut 5 millimeters off and just burnish or paint it, depending on what you want to do personally. Because all of the pockets are designed to have a turned edge on the top. So if you don't want to do that, just cut 5 mil off, because that is the turned edge allowance. when you're doing a turned edge, you want that leading edge to be paper thin. You want a really, really nice skive going from the full 0.8 mil down to 0. So I run it through my bell knife skiver, and then I take my skiving knife and take that edge down to 0, because when you fold it over, you want it to have a really, really smooth transition, so when you're taking cards out and putting cards in, you don't feel that bump. And if you're sort of running your finger over it, you can't feel a bump of, if you left that full thickness and you didn't skive it, you'd have a rather uncomfortable area of your panel. So when you're folding that over to do a turned edge, you don't have to do this, you don't have to push it against a ruler, but I find that it gives it a much nicer crease, just because you introduce that 90 degree to the pocket, to the leather, before you fold it over. So you can just fold it over like this, but I do find you get a little bit of a wave if you don't first do the bone fold trick. Putting a bit of masking tape there is super, super useful, because it gives you a perfectly straight edge to fold your turned edge over to. If you're trying to do this with a pen line or without anything at all, it does make it a little bit harder. On the bottom of any T-slot, I highly recommend skiving it down to 0 as well. You don't want the whole thing down to 0, because you have no rigidity and no structure for when you are stitching it to your panel. But you do want that leading edge just to be completely 0, so that you don't get any bumps underneath your card. Now, with a back panel, which is what this is, you do want to stitch that top edge first, because you won't be able to do this once you've assembled the wallet later on. You won't be able to get to it. So you want to put a nice crease line in it and stitch it before you assemble and paint it or burnish it. Finish the edge basically before anything else, because you won't be able to get to this. So I always have a 3mm stitching allowance, even if I'm using a 2.7 or a 3.85, whatever the stitching pricking irons I'm using are, I always use a 3mm creasing, a 3mm stitching line, just because I use a 1.5mm creaser. So I like to have a rule of thirds. So if I have a 1mm creaser, which is what I use, I want the stitching line to be another 1.5mm in, which comes obviously to 3mm. And it's time to stamp. Now, I absolutely love stamping my logo into stuff, not because I love my logo, which I do, I designed it myself, I'm very proud of that, but because I love seeing a super, super crispy foil impression in the leather. I just find it very, very satisfying. And that is my new logo. I love it. Do you? Let me know in the comments. I would love to know your feelings on it. I genuinely would. So when it comes to assembling your pocket module, let's call it, I never measure from the bottom of the card slot, because the leather will get in the way after the first one you put down. So I always measure from the top of the card slots, and you'll see those dimensions in the pattern pack if you do go ahead and pick one up from my website. But you'll see that in there, and I absolutely love using masking tape for this, because again, you put the glue down and then you have a super crispy glue line just there. It's so tasty. So again, I line up from the top edge, make sure that my T-slot is perfectly lined up so that it doesn't get affected by the bottom at all, because I actually the pattern is designed to have too much at the bottom, just because you never know if you're going to get shrinkage or stretchage. That's not a word, actually, come to think of it. Stretchage is most certainly not a word. But anyway, you then put your 3mm pricking iron at the bottom, again, like all of my pricking irons, 3mm from the bottom and 3mm pricking spacing. This pattern is designed with a 3mm iron, so if you're using something bigger or smaller, you will want to adjust it slightly. I would like to apologise for my audio as well, by the way. I know it's a little bit crackly. I'm actually not sure why. If you guys have any experience with audio equipment or recording equipment, let me know, because my mic is very good, but I'm obviously doing something wrong. Let's see if that makes it any. I think I fixed it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. I think I had my mic. Yes, I am trying to sort this out whilst I record this voiceover. Because what better way to do it than when I'm pissed off after ruining a 2.5 days worth of work wallet, which I am actually very, very annoyed about. But anyway, back to the build. So once you've stitched the T-slots in place, which obviously is the same as any other T-slot you'll ever make, it's time to stitch the top panel. Now, whether you want to do a cast on this is completely up to you. I think I am doing a cast, if I remember correctly, because I like the looks of a slightly more angled back stitch. If you do a cast, you have angle on the front and the back. If you don't do a cast, you have an angle more pronounced on the front, but no angle. You have a flat stitch on the back. Now, a cast is essentially a knot. Well, that's exactly what it is. It's a knot. Whether you want to do that is up to you. There's a lot of controversy. Does it make any difference? I am yet to do a test. I probably should. I don't know if it does make a difference. I will let you decide. If you want me to do a test, cast versus no cast, the strength, I'm not talking about the aesthetics, the strength, let me know in the comment section below, because I would be interested in doing one, but obviously I need to know if you guys have an interest in it. But yes, we have now put the lining of the pocket module on. As you saw me doing there, I lined up all of the dimensions are in the pattern, so if you want to line it up from the pattern, you're welcome to. If you want to line it up from each of the pockets, that also works, because obviously it's designed with those pockets in mind. But once you've the lining for the module is oversized, but only by a couple of mil, because obviously you don't want to try and line up the lining of the pocket module and have it not be big enough, which leather stretches. It's natural, leather stretches. So obviously if you're wanting to not screw this up, overcut your lining. Always overcut your lining. Always overcut everything until you're certain, until you're convinced that it will work. Now this is another reason why I am so pissed off about the result of this wallet, because I thought that it did go so well until right at the last mile, if you want to put it that way. Basically, I mean, this could be its own wallet by itself, a 4-slot front and back card holder. But I decided to go and ruin it. Yeah, I'm still a little bit bitter about it, and it's only been 20 minutes since it happened. I like to record these on the same day, so you get the emotion in my voice. But anyway, you need to stitch the top of that card module whilst, before you put it onto the backing, because you're never going to be able to get to it beforehand. So stitch the module before you attach it to the backing, which this is the backing panel. Again, it's oversized, always do it oversized, but always stitch that card module and then and obviously paint the edges before you stitch it to the backing panel. Now this is not the outer shell, this is the inner shell, if you want to put it that way. This is the inner shell because you want to be able to put cash in this. If you don't need cash, like 90% of the population, you can stitch the you can make the inner panel the outer panel, if that makes sense. So if you don't need a cash slot, you can use the inner panel dimensions as the outer panel, because the outer panel is bigger than the inner panel to allow for cash to go in there. Now, one of the things about stitching leather together is grain doesn't stick to grain, only flesh sticks to flesh. God, I can't speak today. You can't, basically, if you want to stick leather together, you need to take the grain off. So I skived it on the back side of the pocket modules, and I scratched it on the inner panel. And that's simply because I want these edges to be as thin as I can get them, but obviously whilst maintaining some semblance of strength, because obviously there's no point making a wallet that's going to fall apart in 20 minutes. That's against the entirety of what I stand for as a leather worker. So yeah, I like to get it thin, but I don't like to get it thin to the point where it's going to disintegrate. And a lot of what you buy out there for 20 quid, or $20 if you're from the US, it has leather. When you open it, it will look like it is leather, but it's leather on the top and then the rest is fabric. This is 90% pure leather. What isn't leather is the stitching and the glue. Everything else is leather, because I don't make stuff that's going to fall apart. What am I on about? I don't know why you guys sit here and listen to me. But now we've done the inside panel, and this would be the outside panel if you don't need a cash slot. It's time to stitch and finish the top edge of this. Again, because you're not going to be able to get to it when you do the final construction. So stitch this. I use a 3mm stitching iron, but I think I'm going to shut up for a little while and let you guys enjoy the craftsmanship until it gets to the point where I almost cry. And we're back. So, this is the part that makes me legitimately almost cry. So you've seen me put it together, almost flawlessly, I must admit. And now we're going to do the final assembly. We're going to put the card modules with the backing panel onto the cash panel on the back. This goes very, very smoothly. But what doesn't go smoothly is what happens next. So again, I've pre-painted the middle part because I don't stitch the gap. Now what is the gap? The gap is the part between the two modules. I don't stitch it. You're welcome to. I just think it looks a little bit cleaner without the stitching. That part in the middle there. So I've pre-painted it just to give it a little bit of paint so I don't have to worry about that later. Obviously, I'm going to stitch one side at a time. So I've used my leather pliers there to make sure it's really, really well stuck. Now, you can't see it from this angle because I didn't realize I was fucking it up at the time. I did. I screwed it up. I'm stitching with an awl, which you can't see in the video because for some reason I put it down between each stitch. But I'm getting the angle wrong. Every single stitch I'm getting the angle wrong. And you will see it in a moment and you'll see my reaction. But here we go. Oh, fuck. So yeah, I ruined it with my stitching. It looks amazing from the outside. I did that perfectly. I will be selling this. It will be for sale for the cost of materials, just because one of you might like this. It's still a beautiful piece. I'll see you guys next time. Have a fantastic day. Take care.